I will say though, I thought after doing the Dark Matter episode, that I don't know, I didn't feel so high about it because I was just like I felt disconnected.
Yeah.
It was a rough album to review anyway. So
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying is, that album took your joy and you want it back.
you see those tables?
Oh yeah, I see the tables.
They just turned on everybody.
They just turned.
And welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on this side of the Mississippi, hosted by two dashingly good-looking men who share the same middle name. I am the one, the only, the suddenly at a loss for words, Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one, the only, the I gotcha this time, didn't I? Matthew James Durzik.
And this podcast is called Hey, Listen to This. And if you are new here to the show, first of all, on behalf of me and Sarah Turntables here, I want to welcome you to the show. Essentially what we do here is every week, me and Matt take turns picking an album that we're going to dissect head to toe. At this point, we've covered a wide gamut of genres, and our gamut is going to continually evolve, and I wonder how long we can keep up the let's not talk about another album from an artist that we've already covered before.
As long as I got the database, I think we'll be in good shape.
Yeah. Unless, I really feel like wanting to talk about, a specific album. But nonetheless. So, last week, we reviewed Dark Matter by Pearl Jam.
Yes, and by the way, that opening was not a bit. It sucked.
And, listening back to that, I have a question for you, man.
What's that?
So, at the end, you were saying that you wanted to listen to 10 even more. Have you?
Not yet.
Okay. So, okay. I that was just a random question I had in my brain, so.
Yeah, I have not yet listened to 10, but again, I would probably like to do so at some point, just because that's the best kind of Pearl Jam, and what we listened to last week was not the best kind of Pearl Jam.
Yeah. You might be just thinking in your brain, I just want some distance from this band.
It could be.
Yeah.
Plus, of course, we were focusing on this album here, this one that we're going to be talking about this week.
What are we talking about?
We are talking about the 1998 release by country artist Lucinda Williams. It is called Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. And it's not a typical country album by 90s standards. 90s country was the era of Garth and Reba and the likes of Faith Hill and Tim McGraw and the Nashville boom, as it were.
Yeah.
I this definitely comes out of left field as far as country is concerned. It's definitely more of a, I wouldn't say traditional country album, but definitely a more traditional country feel as far as its values. It's not going on the big stuff, but we'll get into all that. As far as why we're covering this, again, I've been going on walks as of late, and I've been looking for albums to listen to and try out, and I had a couple of ones from the 90s, this being one of them, the other being Automatic for the People, that I was thinking, 90s alt, let's see, what Ryan chooses, and he chose this one, so that's what we're talking about this week.
So, you brought this album to the table at the end of last week's episode, and you were saying that this is alt country.
Yes.
And I still don't understand that. You kind of put it into a little bit of a better picture for me when comparing it against what was going on in 90s country.
Yeah.
With what kind of led into early 2000s and what, I don't know. Again, when it comes to country music as a whole, you know this, I'm pretty much of a novice.
Yeah.
But, I feel we mainstream country that started in the 90s, Faith Hill, Tim McGraw, and even like, Kenny Chesney kind of bled into the 2000s and like even progressive to nowadays where it's more like pop country. That even to this day, we're kind of like, getting a revivalist, like, oh, hey, this is real kind of country, like, Sturgill Simpson and like, Chris Stapleton.
I would even, well, I'm trying to think where Jelly Roll would fit into that, but he's definitely more on the, it feels like he's more on the traditionalist side than some other artists. Like, I will say, like, some of the, well, again, we'll get into that with some of the other songs down the line as far as what those, some songs compare to one another, so.
Okay, cool. So, that being said, I mean, my only introduction to Lucinda Williams is, I feel like at one point, I recognized the album cover when I turned it on Spotify, and I saw it, and I was just like, I feel like I've listened to you before. And, like, I think it was due to the fact, like, one Sunday, Pitchfork does... Well, on Sundays, I don't know if you know this, but Pitchfork does their Sunday reviews, where they go a little bit more in depth about a past album. For those of you who aren't aware, it's a fantastic way to, like, if you have a Sunday off, you have some time to kill, check it out. But I feel like they might have done that. I mean, I might have to fact check myself after the episode, but I definitely recognize the album cover. Do I remember any songs off of it?
At least not until now.
Yeah. So ready to get at her and dive into this album, man?
Let's get into this album, and we start with the first track, which is Right in Time. And already off the bat, we have a bit more of a somewhere sort of in the middle of a traditional 90s country song, but not quite so traditional, because Lucinda's vocals on the track are very laid back in a sense. They're not like lazy, but they're laid back, particularly when she's, talking about, I take off my watch and my earrings, my bracelets and everything, lie on my back and moan at the ceiling, oh my baby. And then just sort of lifts into the chorus where, the way you move, it's right in time with me. Honestly, at the start of this review and listening to this was probably going to be my least favorite song on the album, but over time it has grown on me to the point where it's not that. Okay. Because the way it lifts right into that chorus is so nice. I think the backing band does a very solid job of, keeping things simplistic. And again, Lucinda's vocals, again, might turn you off at first, but over time it'll get to you. So I think this is a solid opener. Is my favorite track on the album? No, but it's a solid start.
I would agree with you. And one thing that I noticed with this track here is like you said, like the difference in the vocals between the verses and the chorus. But the way that I walked away from the experience was like I felt like the vocals on the chorus were more of like standard of what Lucinda Williams was trying to go for. I mean, I know this is kind of weird for me to say considering that this is the opening track off the album.
Right.
But I would consider that like, home base for her in terms of this track here. And in the verses, you get her leaning into like, I don't know, almost like a sensual kind of feel. And this is where I'm going to peel back the curtain a little bit and how I reviewed this album compared to like past albums is that I, instead of like, pausing every verse or chorus, I listened to the whole thing. I did not do any research on Genius.com until I actually felt like, processed my feelings for the track. Mm-hmm. And that's because on Genius.com, they said that this song is about mutual masturbation.
Oh!
So, yeah, that kind of changes the whole, context of the song.
Kind of. It kind of makes sense, honestly, that that's what it would be about. Obviously, I wasn't thinking that's what it was about, but, yeah. I mean, obviously with the chorus, the way you move is right in time with me. I thought that was kind of like, like a dance, or maybe even you could say it's, like actual sex. Yeah. As far as it being, that sort of weird subgenre of sex. That's a phrase that just came out of my mouth. We may edit that out later. No, we won't. Anyways, the point being, it's weird that because I was kind of getting a sensual feel from it too. I was also feeling like it being sort of a, almost like an exhaustion in a sense, like taking all this stuff off and just like being at the end of the day, and I wasn't sure if it was pleasure from anything sexual or pleasure from just finally being able to relax after what was going on. But either way, content of this song aside, sound-wise and lyric-wise, I think this is a solid opener.
Yeah. One other note that I'm going to throw at the track here is the instrumentals, and I did appreciate the ends of phrase that they had, where you almost had that little tagline or the cascading little bits when you know what I'm talking about, in the chorus where it almost seems like it's free falling into the next part. Mm-hmm. I felt that was an excellent touch, but overall I will let you know right out of the gate, I don't have a top 3 with this album here. I have a top 2 and a bottom 3. So
a top 2 and a bottom 3.
Yeah. So
okay.
So I will explain my reasoning going on, but overall, my thoughts about Right in Time. It's a solid song. It's a good song. It's an excellent way for us to get into the album.
Okay, that's fair. And I will tell you off the bat that I have a top 3, although 3 might be hard to come across. I definitely have a top 2. Mm-hmm. And as far as a bottom 3, I'm not sure if I have one. So we will see how this goes. Okay. So are you ready to move on to the title track?
Yeah, the title track, Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. So one thing that I noticed right out of the gate with this track here, and it's definitely the case for the rest of the album after, listening to it about 3 times, is unlike what we experienced with Dark Matter and Pearl Jam, you can hear everything clear as day here. Mm-hmm. You can hear the bass and what it's doing specifically, and you can, listen to this on a TV and not experience massive brain hemorrhages.
Wind tunnel syndrome.
So, but in terms of this track here, it's not, we go into what I would consider maybe kind of a home base kind of feel for this album and Lucinda as a whole, where it's looking more back on nostalgia and freedom, where you can put this song on and you are just driving, and it's a perfect mellow driving song. And the verses as a whole, I appreciate the linear nature of it, where you get the picture of the subject matter of the song in the house, and she hears somebody pulling up, and someone's beckoning her to an adventure, and then even at the very end, where you can feel that adventure did not turn out the way that it was planned, where they were talking about a child in the back seat, about 4 or 5 years old, looking out the window, and a little bit of dirt mixed with tears. So maybe kind of all that experience being that dirt and tears were life didn't turn out the way that you planned. It wasn't this big adventure. And one other note I'm gonna say here that's about the song as a whole, I did appreciate the contrast of when the subject's in the house, you hear the lyrics about Loretta singing on the radio, and then when they're out on the road, Hank's singing on the radio. So maybe that could be playing to gender stereotypes, women are supposed to be at home and men are on the road. I don't know, I might be reading a little bit too much into that.
Maybe.
But overall, I mean, it's not a bad track compared to Right in Time. I definitely would I would prefer that track, only because Lucinda's vocals kind of can get a little bit, I don't know, monotone, for lack of a better term. Like, I feel like the moments where she shines in this album here is whenever she's using her voice as a platform to elevate the song. This kind of just seems like, oh no, hey, we're just back into like a traditional kind of country feel.
I can respect your opinion. However, I don't quite agree with it because while I do understand your reservations about her vocals, I think the lyrical content on this is quite very good. You mentioned the switch up between Loretta and Hank, and that's an interesting observation. I don't know if it's true at all about it, whether it be at home or in the course of being on the road. But just the visions of what the lyrics out of the gate on this one, sitting in the kitchen, a house in Macon, Loretta sing on the radio, smell of coffee, eggs, and bacon, car wheels on a gravel road. And it just keeps going on as far as like the theme of just sort of, to me, this is a song about her, reminiscing about her childhood and just sort of, thinking back to the good old days or at least were the old days. I don't know if they were good because like you said at the end, dirt mixed with tears.
Yeah.
And that could just simply be, whether it's a matter of realizing life isn't the way that that you meant it to be. And, or it could just simply be, a child not realizing what things are yet. So it could be one or the other. But I will say that, and I've talked about this on even last week's episode with Won't Tell, I tend to appreciate songs that you can listen to and just envision a great picture of what it is. And this is one of those. And it's tough because I think I want to put this at number 3 in my top 3. Because of that, because it's just, again, it's a solid rocker too. Like you can definitely feel like the sort of the rock playing underneath. Like the opening riff is a little harder than your typical country of the time. Oh, yeah. It sounds a little bit more towards, I don't know if you would want to say Red Hot Chili Peppers or something like that. Yeah, I like the track a lot. So.
I mean, let me be perfectly clear. I don't think this is a bad track by any means. I would easily listen to this track over most tracks off of Dark Matter any day of the year. Because otherwise, you would need a new podcast co-host here.
I would probably need resuscitation as well. Would be the case.
But I don't know. You're absolutely right with the ability of Lucinda being able to transport the listener into this mental picture of her childhood and basically, who knows, maybe this is something that could have happened to her. I mean, a lot of good country artists have the ability to take stories that they've experienced and make it into a decent song. Mm-hmm. I just wish I got a little bit more out of her vocals, especially in that last verse where she's talking about the child in the backseat about 4 or 5 looking out the window a little bit, like I mentioned before. Yeah, it just sounded like every other verse. I mean, I didn't want her crying or anything like that, but I feel like with lyrics like that, if you would have maybe twinged it up a little bit, or even instrumentally did something a little bit different to highlight it.
I was thinking the same thing. If you sort of had the band sort of dial back, or maybe even come to a full stop, and just let the vocals come through and sort of alert the listener. This is a pivotal moment in this telling of the story of this song. Yeah. I understand where you're coming from. It didn't bother me as much, but I completely know where you're coming from.
Okay. So, you ready to pivot onto Too Cool to Be Forgotten?
Too Cool to Be Forgotten. Numbers complete in the title. So, this song very much feels like, we were shifting from sort of the childhood memories of car wheels on a gravel road to the I'm older now and I'm not sure how I fit into the social scene type of vibe. With this song, lyrics such as no dope smoking, no beer sold after 12 o'clock, Rosedale, Mississippi, Magic City juke joint, Mr. Johnson sings over in a corner by the bar, sold his soul to the devil so he can play guitar, too cool to be forgotten, hey, hey, too cool to be forgotten. So it almost feels like, almost similar to Bruce Springsteen's Glory Days, where it's talking about people, who have been in this town for a long time, and things really haven't changed, and people are sort of finding those little snippets of fame, whether or not they are really achieving anything, or whether or not the singer, in this case Lucinda, is really achieving any type of feeling with what she's saying. I do like the general vibe of this track, sort of the laid back, almost like, this sounds like something like Sheryl Crow probably would have sung at some point. And again, it's not my top 3 because it's just a little bit too repetitive as far as the flow of the song. Because once you kind of get past the first verse, it's just kind of, wash, rinse, repeat for the next, 2-ish minutes. But I will say the guitar work from, Gurf Morlix and John Chambati do play a nice role. And I think Lucinda's vocals on this track are sort of held back properly in this case. So, solid track, but not my top 3.
Okay. So, you were right with how this track can get a little bit repetitive, watch, rinse, repeat. I kind of wish that the June Bug versus Hurricane had a little bit of a bigger meaning behind it, because the only thing I was able to get from it, according to my research, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's just it's a title of a comic by Kevin Quigley.
Oh, no, that's the first I've heard of it, so.
Okay.
See, I'll pull back the curtain a little bit, too. I went full traditionalist for this review, whereas I listened to the album 3 times, and that's what I'm going off of. Okay. And I also have, I have the album on CD, so I'm also looking at the lyrics and the CD pamphlet back when they used to do that, so.
So, I mean, and the, also moments where the verses are delivered, it kind of seems like she's trying to get out a lot of words, and sometimes it can kind of come across a little bit haphazardly in this track here. And like the overall, random snippets here, I wish that they were connected a little bit better. It just, I get what you were saying where, hey, this could just be looking back on the good old days, and if this is a track for how Lucinda wanted to reflect on those times, and maybe this is just a track for her. And the one moment that I did appreciate in the track here is at the very end, on the line that goes, "I told him, no way, babe, that's your own death, you see." That was an excellent moment. But overall, I walked away from this track here feeling like I was disconnected from Lucinda and the song as a whole. Maybe it's because I didn't grow up in that kind of environment, and I wanted a little bit more connectivity between the verses. Mm-hmm. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived at my second least favorite track off the album.
Wow. Okay. All right. I can kind of understand where you're coming from with that. See, I two things to your point that you just, or your points that you just made. Number one, when I talked about this being comparable to "Glory Days" by Bruce Springsteen, that song, much like this song, seems to be a little bit of a sardonic look at, living life in the same old town as it is. Yeah. So I don't think she's trying to glorify anything in this song as much as just sort of acknowledge, hey, here's how things are, so be it. Yeah. And I will agree that the whole idea of June Bug versus Hurricane does leave a little bit, you're both what's the whole point behind that? It doesn't really leave you with anything. Yeah. And secondly, the fact that you're talking about how you don't really connect to the lyrics is because you don't grow up in that environment. I can understand that as well. Yeah. I tend to look at it as, she's sharing her experience with us, and it's up to us to paint that picture. And for some of us, it might work, some of it might not. But I understand your perspective on that. So
cool. You ready to move on to Drunken Angel?
Drunken Angel.
And so we go from right in time, where I consider it to be a good opener, to Car Wheels on a Gravel Road, where I'm okay, we're getting a little bit less, in my opinion. To Too Cool to Be Forgotten, to even a little bit lesser. To, and believe it or not, this is my second favorite track off the album.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I really enjoy this song, and like one of the things that initially stood out for me in this track here is Lucinda's inflection with her vocals. Like, so this track here, if you guys aren't aware, I thought it was like a self, like, you know, hatred kind of track, being like, hey, you know, you're nothing but a drunk artist who, like, you know, gets plastered come sundown. No, it's actually about a singer-songwriter named Blaze Foley. And, like, I really dig how much you can really picture what's going on in this track here. And, like, you know, the lines about whenever the sun went down and you were blown away basically hints at, like, the fact that the drunken angel at night gets smashed. And I love that kind of, like, you know, motif, because it's just like, not motif, but like that idea where, hey, when the sun's up, you know, the world's seeing you and you have to act prim and proper and professional, but when the sun comes down, it's on, baby. Like, some people, like, you know, lose their inhibitions like that. And the guitar work on here is fantastic. I like the moments where it accents certain phrases by adding a little line. I feel like that's a great touch. And the whole song being littered with great lyrics about describing the effects of fame and alcoholism and how they affect each other work out so well. Yeah. Overall, like, you know, fantastic track, man. Like, I really dug this track.
I like the track too. Not in my top 3, but I can understand where you're coming from with it. It does paint a very vivid picture of this situation. You know, just watching this person become, you know, this drunk buffoon, somehow managing to think they're, you know, the hottest thing on earth, and meanwhile they're just stumbling over themselves financially, spiritually, performatively, whatever the case may be. My only wish is that for a track this passive-aggressive, or even aggressive as it were, maybe a little bit more of a push as far as the vocals are concerned. Not that Lucinda's bad on this track at all. I think this is a good track. It just kind of, for me, especially on repeated listens, sort of went in one ear and out the other. Not in a bad way. Again, I think I agree with you. The backing band is fantastic. I think the guitar work is very solid. Steve Earle on harmonica and acoustic guitar on this track does a very good job. In fact, there are 3 people on regular guitar. Gurf Morlix, Steve Earle, and Johnny Lee Schell, and John Chambody on bass guitar this time, that do a lot of the heavy lifting. So yeah, I think that this is a very solid track, but it's not my top 3.
Okay, cool. So that being said, you ready to move on to Concrete and Barbed Wire?
Concrete and Barbed Wire. Now, this one came very close to my top 3, because I love how this song definitely has a bit more of a guitar around the campfire type feel. It's a very simplistic song, talking about you know, a wall that divides 2 people, and that chorus of concrete and barbed wire, concrete. You just imagine, like, her and her band sitting around a campfire singing the song, or, you know, passing whiskey while singing the song, whatever the case may be. Definitely a lot of strong Big Thief type of vibes on this track. The only thing is, again, it sort of gets to the point of going one ear and out the other for me, in a sense. Again, not in a bad way. I like the song a lot, but it just didn't quite stick out to me like a couple other tracks did later on down the line. But again, very simplistic with her on vocal and acoustic guitar. Steve Earle is the backing vocalist and acoustic guitar player here as well. So yeah, I think this is nice. And also, this will not be the last time we mentioned his name. Roybit Tan on accordion does a very good job of supplementing a lot of nice backing there. He is actually a member of, either is or was a member of Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band.
Nice. So I absolutely agree with you in terms of like how this kind of feels like a campfire kind of song. That was my even without even like looking into any notes and annotations on Genius.com. That was my immediate feel. I was a little taken back at first by like, okay, what is she talking about with like concrete and barbed wire? Because like the opening verse is just like, oh hey, like there's a barrier, but it's not really there. It's just concrete and barbed wire. I'm like, are we in the Matrix? And like Keanu Reeves is going up to that infant and she's saying there is no spoon when there is actually a spoon. But thanks to a little bit of research, I discovered that this track here was inspired by the Berlin Wall, and how that kind of made the song feel a little bit. It made a little bit more sense in my head, where it's all about like, hey, we put these physical barriers in between us, but they're not actually there. Like all it takes is that human connection to reach out, and I feel like it's a very nice gesture. Lyrically, like. I kind of wish like there would be a little bit more meat on the bone in the little snippet stories, but they're good on their own. The one like I'm not sure how I still feel about it. The one story about like hey, like there's these dogs that might be like coming after me, but they like there's that barrier of concrete and barbed wire. That kind of goes against the nature of like human connection, but maybe it's just trying to say like it can like that whole barrier thing can work in a different aspect of like oh hey, that thing that you feel like you have a barrier between you and a harm that you're fearing it could be artificial, like that person can easily cross over. But I absolutely agree, like decent enough song. No, I'm not. I would say this is a good song. It doesn't land in my top 3, but overall, it knows what it does and it does it well.
Yeah, I'm wholeheartedly right there with you. Again, it's a very solid campfire type song, and you could definitely envision it, which is always a plus for me. So
the next track is Lake Charles. And this track here is a tribute to Lucinda's former boyfriend, Clyde Woodward. He didn't die when they were together, so I mean, let's just put that out there. But I mean, which isn't like anyways. I hate to say this about this track here because you might like this track a lot. This song drags for me. Like, she constantly says about like, well, he wants to go back to Lake Charles, but go back to Lake Charles. And again, this might be another moment where Lucinda is like, maybe trying to paint a picture, not paint a picture, but like, she's more focusing her songwriting as a way to process her own feelings, that like I just can't connect to. I do like the chorus where she is talking about like an angel taking the fear away from like Clyde. That's a nice touch. But moments like where she's giving geography lessons where he was born in I'm not even going to try to pronounce that word. That's in East Texas, not far from the border. I don't feel like that's exactly 100% needed. But like I think the biggest issue that I have with this song, like it's nearly 6 minutes long, and like I said, like we hear a lot about Clyde's love of Lake Charles, but we don't know why he loved there. So like what's going on in Lake Charles? Is there like a gold mine there or something? So I will say that this is my third least favorite track on the list. Oh,
it's your third least favorite, not the least. We haven't gotten to that point yet, have we?
No.
Ooh, okay. I do like this song, but I completely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
It does drag quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I was flirting about putting this in my bottom 3 if there is one. Because it does kind of just meander a little bit. Like it sounds fine. I think Lucinda's vocals are very good on here. I do like the line, particularly towards the end of the song, where it's, did you run as far as you can go down the Louisiana highway across across Lake Pontchartrain. And I probably butchered that. Now your soul is in Lake Charles, no matter what they say. I like that sort of dark turn in the song, basically saying, well, you're here now, and there's nothing you can do about it, which probably means, hey, you're dead. But aside from that, I'm right there with you. Like, it sounds pleasant enough that I can't really give it any true negative marks, but it does meander quite a bit. And if I were to say if I had a bottom three, this would probably be at like number 3, bottom 3. So probably the same as you, actually.
Thank God, because I feel like I'm nitpicking a lot on this album, and you're like I felt bad. So
I understand. I mean, there are certain spots in which there is to nitpick. Again, I think this is a fine track. Does go on a little long in the tooth, but it's fine.
Yeah. All right. So you ready to move on?
Yes. Let's move on to the next track, which is "Can't Let Go." And I have a bit of a mixed feeling about this track.
Okay.
Because on the one hand, I do like the sort of basic format it's going for. It kind of reminds me of an old like Rolling Stones song, sort of like "Not Fade Away" or something along those lines. Maybe even like "It's All Over Now." Yeah. Just sort of this sort of frenzied like 50s, 60s-ish like blues shuffle. But part of me just can't get past the fact that Lucinda's vocals on this track are a bit too mixed in. Like they don't really stand out too much. And at the same time, the lyrics aren't really super great either. They seem more generic than anything else. Like she says, you don't like to see me standing around, feel like I've been shot and didn't fall down. Well, it's over, I know it, but can't let go. And like the way I just sounded was more clear and concise than it is on the actual track itself. And honestly, I don't know. It's between one or the other, but I'd probably put this in my bottom 2. And it's not even that bad of a track. Like if you have this on the background, it's fine. It's a nice like little upbeat track. Yeah. But it just like, I don't know. Based on some of the other ones we're gonna get to, I just feel like this is one of the lesser tracks on the album.
So my feelings about this track here, they might contrast a little bit with how you feel about it. It's not my favorite song off the album. I'm just going to say that right out of the gate, so it didn't land in my top 2. But I'm going to put it in the bucket that is starting to get a little bit full with like, hey, this is a good track. I like the hush focused vocals that we get in the verse. I feel like that was a nice touch, and how it contrasts with how it opens up in the chorus. I feel like that works out well. I do like the bare instrumentation on it. Like you get that shaker. I felt like that was a good touch on there. And the offbeat guitar strums that can be heard in the track alongside the slide guitar are nice. And the hollow drum feel that you hear in the instrumental break, that's a nice touch too. But overall, like, it's a good track, but it doesn't do enough to take it up to that next level, in my opinion. And like, yeah, I mean, there's some good lines about like refusing to let go of a relationship, but overall, like I said, doesn't do enough to take it up to that next level.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And again, it's not a bad song. It's an okay song. Again, like I said, if you're just listening to the background, if you're just listening to the album as a whole, it fits. It's fine. But just kind of didn't like you say, take it to that next level for me, where it's like, oh yeah, this is real good. It didn't just kind of like meh.
So that being said, ready to move on?
Ready to move on
to I Lost It. So even before we begin, I'm very glad that I changed up my research methods here, because Genius claimed that this song specifically was a slightly faster version of Williams' track that was previously recorded called Happy Woman Blues. Do you know that track?
I do not.
So not only is this track slower than the track that it's supposed to be a faster version of, but it's not the same track whatsoever.
Oh.
Like I was just like, like what? I would put this track here, within that good song bucket territory, where like the chorus is pretty cut and dry country, but I feel like it lands pretty well, and I feel like that chorus is the biggest draw for me in this track. And the lyrics themselves, they depict Williams as someone who is unsure of herself. On one hand, she wants to give herself over to this someone, but isn't sure that it's got to be at the cost of her integrity, which is a nice message in its own right. Lyrics exemplifying this being never take nothing, don't belong to me, everything's paid for, nothing's free. If I give my heart, will you promise not to break it? I do appreciate those lyrics. They're good. The guitar solo, I will say, though, it's a definition of a nothing burger, where it's just like, it's there. Like, if you walk into it, you're gonna, like, you're gonna feel something because there's a force there, but it doesn't do anything to take away from the track, or it doesn't add anything on it. But on the plus side, we do get an accordion part, which is nice for me.
Yeah, Robitan on the accordion doing a very good job there. I will say I completely agree with you about the guitar solo being a nothing burger, and the proof of it being that you just reminded me that there's a guitar solo in this song.
Love it!
I was just like, oh, there was one. Okay, I believe him. I'm kind of right there with you as far as this. This was kind of flirting with being in my bottom three too, but again, there's really not a bottom three, like bottom three for me on this track, or excuse me, on this album. There's just songs that are above the rest, and then there's the rest. Yeah. Again, I feel like the lyrics are slightly leaning towards pedestrian, but I do agree that those lines of never take nothing, don't belong to me, everything's paid for, nothing's free, does come across strong. I think Williams' singing on this track is very good. I do like the accordion. Again, it's a very simplistic song, and it does kind of go in one ear and out the other. But once again, not in an unpleasant way. I like this track.
So, we're going to move on to Metal Firecracker.
Let's move on to Metal Firecracker. Now, this track might be, and I'm just gonna say it. It is my least favorite track on the album. Because I don't know, something about it, the nothingness of it does kind of just like, again, a lot of these songs on this album sort of flow into one another, and it'll make more sense later as to why I'm picking this as my least favorite, and even then it's not terrible. Like, I do like the guitar chords in there that very reminiscent of the Love Song by The Cure. But lyrics such as, once you held me so tight I thought I'd lose my mind. You said I rocked your world. You said it was for all time. You said that I'd always be your girl. We put on ZZ Top and turn up real loud. I used to think you were strong. I used to think you were proud. I will say the chorus is pretty good with all I ask. Don't tell anybody the secrets I told you. But I don't know. This I will say, again, not a bad song, but definitely the least of the leastiest as far as the tracks on this album, as far as I'm concerned.
So it's funny that you mentioned how, like, a lot of the tracks are kind of starting to blend into each other, because I feel like we're starting to get into Exile and Guyville territory here, and like you get a lot of the tracks that just seem like they are the same. And maybe this is this album here as a whole is a reflection of my evolution of a listener and music dissector, where maybe if we were to ever do a redo of a review, I would be interested in redoing Exile and Guyville, just to see how my approach has changed. But the thing that makes this track here stand out, and I feel like I'm a slightly higher on this track than you.
Probably.
It's not my favorite. But I'm putting it into that ever-growing, hey, this is a good song bucket here, is the fact that the way that she delivers certain lines in this track, where the way that she says biker in the first verse is a very standout moment for me, which is a very incredibly odd thing for me to be like, oh yeah, give me more of that. But I mean, for some reason it tickled my fancy. I feel like what made this track stand out even, well, I don't want to say stand out, but like gave a little bit more clarity on. Kind of like my experience with Concrete and Barbed Wire. I was just like, what are we talking about? A metal firecracker? Like, is this a euphemism for like sex or anything that you can like, use with that? Do you know what it is?
I'm going to take a wild guess and say that's a car.
It's a tour bus. So
tour bus. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Apparently this track here was written about a secret love that she had with a bassist that she was on the road with. So with that context in mind, and like lyrics about like how intense the love was, and like how everything had to be hush hush, secret, it was a decent enough track for me. But the other moment that I'm just gonna highlight off of here is the interplay between the bass guitar and the lead guitar and how they complement each other in the verses. I feel like that worked out very well. But if it wasn't for me doing the research of what a metal firecracker actually is, and maybe the story with the bassist and the secret affair that they had, maybe this song would jump down a peg for me. But it's in that, hey, this is a good song bucket for me.
And I stand by what I said about, again, the repetitiveness of this album getting to this point of being a little too much. But I will say that the story that you brought up of that is intriguing, that it would make for a good song context, and it's a solid song here too.
So, ready to move on to Greenville?
Moving on to Greenville.
So, this song here is a good song with a bit of a change up where we get more of a slower, more thoughtful ballad being given to the listener. I feel like this kind of fits well sequencing wise with the track list, because you get in the previous track we literally just talked about like a secret love affair, and like how that apparently that love affair ended with the bassist being like, hey, you don't fit into my agenda, and how this is more like a FU kind of song. You're kind of a loser, go back to Greenville. The harmonies at the end here, they add a nice, they at the end are described as beautiful, but I wouldn't call it that. I feel like they do add a nice touch. I feel like it's more of a duet as opposed to like complementing each other. And then, yeah, I mean, not much else to the song other than that. I mean, like, it's a good song on its own. It's more of a farewell to a loser lover, like I described. And, like, one other moment that I did like off this track is the interlude is more of a moment of a pause than anything with the listener, where you can just sit with the feelings that Lucinda is bringing to the table. Overall, though, putting this again into the good song bucket. Nothing great or nothing like, subpar. It's a good song.
I can understand that. That being said, though, it is my number one track off this album.
Let's go!
So I do think that the harmonies are beautiful, and part of me kind of feels bad about putting this at number one, only because it feels like it's cheating.
Yeah.
Because do you know who sings back up on this as far as the harmonist?
Negative.
It is Emmylou Harris.
Who's that?
Okay, never mind then.
Again, novice here.
I understand that. She was a country singer. Started out in the early 70s as a backup singer for Graham Parsons, went on her own in the mid-70s, and has been sort of steadily recording pretty much ever since. Her sort of big breakthrough was when she was part of the quote-unquote trio that released an album called Trio of herself, Dolly Parton, and Linda Ronstadt in 1987.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, she's been in the country scene for a long time, and she also sort of brings a lot to the table along with Lucinda here. I think the vocal, and the reason I put this at number one is because on first listen and pretty much every other listen since then, this is the track that to me was like, that really stood out. Like, the harmonies work so well. The phrasing on the verses, because there really is not a chorus here. The phrasing here reminded me a little bit, I didn't think about it until today, A little bit of the song I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For by U2.
Okay.
So very much into that sort of same vein. And I also like what I really think is a nice touch is like every verse, something else gets added, whether it's the harmony vocals or the drums or Roy Batan's accordion. It just builds and builds and builds. And to me, that just is just a nice thing. The only thing that I can say negative about the song is that it feels like it ends prematurely. Okay. And that's just me hoping that there would be more of the song. So, easy number one for me.
I think I will revisit this track here because I do remember liking it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I wasn't like, maybe my new research method where I'm like, okay, listen to the album, then, after each track, give my thoughts, and then listen to the album on its own. Maybe, maybe change it up a little bit, but, I will make this promise to you. I will, at least between now and our next review, I will revisit Greenville, and I will give you my thoughts.
I appreciate that.
So, the next track... Are you ready for the next track?
Yes, the next track is Still I Long for Your Kiss. And this track is a little different because it sort of gets back on that bright sort of timbre that is in contrast with a bit more of a darker song like Greenville. This feels almost like more like a 50s type of like swing feel to it, particularly when she's talking about, still I long for your kiss, still I long for your kiss. I know it's over because you told me so. I try to leave, but I can't let you go. I can't believe you don't want me no more. Still I long for a kiss. To me, I feel like the sort of, I wouldn't say lesser lyrics, but more simplistic lyrics do work in the song's favor. Yeah. Because it just feels like a very simplistic love song, if nothing else. And again, I think the backing band just sort of slowing it down to that sort of 6/8 or even slow 3/4 type of feel to it. Does play a nice touch. It does kind of go into that what you call the good song bucket, where it's good but doesn't really elevate itself to the top of the crop. But yeah, I think after Greenville, this is a nice follow-up to that.
So you want to hear something crazy?
Oh boy.
This is my favorite track off the album.
Do tell.
So I don't know if you're catching a theme here, but I tend to gravitate towards songs where Lucinda, you can really feel the emotion, and like she's using her voice in a different kind of way. And here I'm gonna highlight the fact that the way that she sounds, where she's just like, "Hey, I still long for your kiss." Like you can feel that passion there. Maybe passion's the wrong kind of word, but that emotion as a whole. But like that coupled with the embrace of country blues, and it builds up and then it comes back down, makes for one hell of a good time for me. The punchiness of the instrumentation adds another great element to the track, and that only gets highlighted with the instrumental break. So lyrically, the only section I really want to highlight here, because other than this section here, there's not really much to the track, is the days go by, but they don't seem the same. I cry and I cry and I call out your name. I go downtown, I see your face. Nobody around can take your place, but you put me down and you turned me away. You can feel that coupled with that emotion that she's bringing to the table is a very nice touch for me. And that section that I just mentioned repeats twice, and it has that kind of weekend effect for me, where it can repeat, but it stays fresh in my ears. But yeah, overall, easily my favorite track off the album. I would go back to this if I were to be revisiting anything from Lucinda Williams in regards to this album here. This track would be my first visit.
I can respect that. I do agree that she does bring a lot of passion to her vocals, and I think the hushed nature of when she says "Still I long for a kiss" is a very nice touch. Again, I put this in the good song bucket. Doesn't elevate to my top 3, but I completely understand where you're coming from with your pick of it being your favorite.
So the next track,
Joy, the penultimate track on the album, and this is about as rocky as rock gets on this track. Again, lyrically, not much to write home about, but it doesn't really matter because this is more of a vibe track than anything. Pretty much the lyrics go to, I don't want you anymore because you took my joy. I don't want you anymore. You took my joy. I want it back. And then she's just going to just list off places she can go find that joy, whether it's West Memphis or Slidell. And it's very much, to me, I feel like this is a Jack White track that Jack White himself did not record. Like, that's the feel I got from this immediately. That, like, this is like a blunderbuss era Jack White track. A little bit of country, a lot of hard rock, sort of the dial, like almost AM radio type vocals on it. I think are a very nice touch. I think this is just a great driving song, and I have it at number 2 in my top 3.
I'm about to take away your joy.
Yeah, this is your least favorite, isn't it?
Yeah, it's my least favorite.
I am legitimately surprised by that, because I thought if there was going to be any I thought this, honestly, going into this, I thought this might be your number 1 just because of the Jack White vibes.
Yeah, I didn't catch the Jack White vibes, but you're probably, well, no, you're right with that. Like, I can see, like, this is something that Jack White was inspired by listening to. This is, I'm kind of curious to see when the White Stripes came into play, because they were early 2000s.
I want to say, if my memory serves me correctly, this album was released in 1998, and I think their debut album was released in 1999. So we're talking about a year's difference between the two.
So, I mean, maybe he was listening to this at the time.
He could very well have been.
So, that being said, like, I get, I know what this song is going for. It's basically like, screw you, man, like, to an ex-lover. It just doesn't land for me, man. Like, maybe, like, if we were comparing this off of, I forget what the big single that was in Exile in Guyville that I absolutely hated.
I believe that was Never Say.
Yeah. That's how I feel about this track here. It just repeats too much. And, like, maybe, like, if there was... You could have repetition in lyrics and it land pretty well for me, but maybe don't have it be, I don't want to say as prominent, because, like, there is moments where, like, you do get instrumental breaks. Maybe just don't go on and on and on about it. Maybe just be like, take the Neil Young approach where, like, you can have, like, a home base of, like, hey, you took my joy and I want it back, screw you, dude. But then have, like, the instruments go off on this big old jam session. I feel like that would have been a bit of a better experience for me.
Honestly, I kind of understand where you're coming from. I'm still sticking to my guns of putting this at number 2 in my top 3. But I honestly would like to hear, like, the Neil Young version of this song. Maybe not Neil Young singing, but definitely the format of, maybe just going with the chorus and maybe putting a few guitar solos in there. That being said, I do like the solos in the song. Again, I like the trick of pulling Lucinda's vocals back. Again, I got the Jack White vibes, but I understand why you didn't.
I will agree with you that the solos were a highlight off the song for me. The sliding guitar, that how they work in there, like, it's a very nice effect. So that I will agree with you on. But overall, like, this is bottom of the barrel for me.
One last thing before we move on to the final track. I'm looking at the liner notes. There are 4 guitarists listed on this track.
We need more guitar.
Steve Earle on resonator guitar, Gurf Morlix on electric guitar, Johnny Lee Schell on electric guitar, and Bo Ramsey on electric guitar, not to outdo John Ciambatti on bass guitar, Donald Lindley on drums and percussion, and Lucinda Williams on vocal.
So, the next track is Jackson.
The next track is Jackson. The last track is Jackson. And boy, this was close to getting into my top 3. I would probably say this is number 4 for me on the album.
Yeah.
Because to me, this is as pretty as Greenville is. I do like it almost feels like the vocals on this track were recorded off like a tape or like a small tape recorder. Yeah. I thought that was a nice touch. The one thing I couldn't get past, you were talking about it earlier, I want to say it was on either Too Cool to Be Forgotten or one of the tracks where you talked about there being like a geography lesson. I think Lake Charles was the one you were talking about, it being a geography lesson. That's kind of how I feel about this song, and what sets it apart from the likes of Greenville, where it just feels like she's repeating the same lines over and over and over again, just with different cities, whether it be Jackson or Lafayette or Baton Rouge or Vicksburg. Again, I think her singing is fantastic. I think the production is fantastic, but just the repetitiveness of it just kind of pulled it just out of my top 3.
I agree with you. This track, ladies and gentlemen, this is going into the ever expanding good song bucket. But what holds it back? You hit the nail right on the head. Like I kind of wish like there was more to it than at this certain point, like when we get to here, here's the action I'm gonna do. It kind of seems a little cookie cutter. And it's kind of a shame because this song's an absolutely beautiful track. It's an excellent way to wrap up the whole experience as a whole, because like not only like because we've talked about like experiences with like heartbreak and falling in love, but like this kind of just seems like the way to just wrap everything up in a nice little bow. Like, hey, no matter what, I'm not going to cry. It's going to be okay. The song does build out very well, though. I feel like it builds out a little bit better than Greenville. So, where, you get that tambourine that comes in when she's talking about Baton Rouge, and then the harmonies, and then a twangy guitar comes in when she's singing about being back in Jackson again. I feel like that was a very nice touch, but it doesn't, like, the song itself doesn't explode. And not all, like, slow build tracks don't need to explode. Like, I almost feel like I gravitate to tracks a little bit more if the songwriter can practice that discipline of, like, holding back. Because that shows off a little bit. Like, that restraint is a very nice touch. But overall, like, agree with you. Kind of wish this wasn't like, hey, if we go here, this is what I'm going to do. So, we did it. We did it, man.
We took those car wheels and we put them on a gravel road.
And we found out what it means to go down to Jackson and steal some joy.
Yes, and we may be buying a map after this just to find out where all these places are.
So, do you want me to go first with the ratings review, or do you want?
I'll go first. I'll go first with this.
Okay.
To me, this album, I like a lot. I wouldn't say it's as. I feel comparing this to the last album I chose, which was Adele's 30. I feel like there's no track on this album, maybe with the exceptions of Greenville and Joy, that really super stood out to me and really made me go, whoa, this is amazing. Conversely, I don't think there was any track on here like Can I Get It off of Adele's 30 where I was just like, oh, absolutely not, none of that at all. To me, I think this is an album that is very much better as a whole than some of its parts. It's a great album to, just sort of listen to front to back. Doesn't have really any super standout moments, but at the same time, doesn't have any flaws, like super big flaws to me at all. And I think this does do a good job of being a country album in the way of presenting itself in sort of this, picture of living in sort of a rural area such as the South. All that to say, I'm going to give this album an 8 out of 10.
So, my feelings off this album, because, again, let me preface this by I'm a novice in this genre here. This is our third country album that we reviewed, right?
Is it?
Neil Young.
You count that as country?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. 3.
See, this is how much of a novice I am.
I mean, I guess you're not wrong. That album's pretty country. Toby Keith obviously is country.
I forgot about Toby Keith.
What was your third one?
The band.
Okay, then 4.
Oh my goodness. We've done so many reviews at this point. Not like so many, but like anyways. For me, this was a nice, easygoing country album that shows, Lucinda portraying her heart and her life. Moments where she shines are where she allows those emotions. Like she uses like her voice as a platform to elevate songs, like in "Drunken Angel," and even like in songs like "Right in Time." Like I know that song is not really like considering what we discussed about it, it's not really like, emotional in a traditional sense, but I feel like it lands pretty well. The moments that hold this album back for me aren't the bad tracks, though, oddly enough, which is something that you would traditionally say. I would just say that, how I talked about that ever-expanding bucket of, like, good tracks? Like, if you take, like, maybe at least half of those tracks and elevate it and maybe kick it up a notch, my experience listening to this album would even take it up to a higher plane and probably even match what you took away from the album as a whole. So, that being said, the rating that I'm going to give this album is going to be a 7 out of 10.
I can respect that. That's a solid score, 7 out of 10. So our average comes out to 7.5 out of 10.
Cuz math.
And as far as the next album I would recommend based off this, I kind of hinted at it a little bit ago. And it's an album I haven't listened to in a long time, but I do know I've listened to it front to back, so I'm going to recommend it here. And for the second week in a row, I'm recommending a Jack White album, and it is Blunderbuss. Because to me, that is another great example of mixing rock with a little bit of country. My favorite song off that album is On and On and On, which just, sort of a very stripped back sort of countryish song. Of course, also has a rock from, I think it's 16 Saltines on that album. So that would be my next album based off this.
So I struggled with my next album, right?
Not gonna lie, I did too, but I'm curious to see what you got for this.
So I forgot what I even put in the first place for my first recommendation, but I definitely did change it up, and that's because like after I did my detailed listening of this, I sat down and listened to an album that I own in my vinyl collection. That album's by a band called Soccer Mommy, and the album is called Clean. Clean by Soccer Mommy is a nice... It almost seems like that album could have been influenced by this album here specifically. Not in the more the country realm, but this is that album more kind of dives into that alternative female-led singer-songwriter realm. And it's an overall pleasant listen. It doesn't go too hard in the paint. In a couple of the different tracks, my opinion could change if if we ever do a review of it. But it's a solid album. For those of you who are not familiar with Soccer Mommy or even the Jack White album that Matt referenced, we both heavily recommend.
Absolutely. And speaking of albums we heavily recommend, it is your turn. What do you have?
So, I'm gonna have a little fun with this next review.
I'm nervous.
Don't be. So, we're gonna have for this review here. I decided to go into my 2 music collections to determine where we're gonna go next. One is gonna be an album that I own on vinyl. The other album is an album that I own through Bandcamp.
Ooh.
The one is an album by an artist who has the fewest Spotify listeners that we've ever covered in the history of our show. So that album is, more of like, Ryan Kern's Central.
Mm-hmm.
The other album they have more Spotify listeners than Julian Baker. That artist.
Ooh.
And that artist that I just mentioned is a artist that I think I mentioned in the Bruce Springsteen review, if anything, after we did the review itself. But that being said, the way I'm going to have you pick between these 2 artists here, because I kind of led you to the water here hardcore.
A little bit.
So, I want to, both these artists are based in a certain geographical area. So I'm going to have you pick between the White House or the Sydney Opera House.
Ooh. The White House or the Sydney Opera House? Whew, that's tough.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the Sydney Opera House.
So you've chosen the album that I wanted to, well, that I mentioned in the Bruce Springsteen review, I think.
Is this the one with more than Julian Baker or less?
More than Julian Baker.
Oh.
So the artist that we're gonna cover next is a group called Gang of Youth, and the album is their 2022 release, Angel in Real Time.
Okay.
So
I do remember that now. You remember, because I believe this was the one you recommended from the Springsteen episode.
So that being said, listener, if you've not experienced an Angel in Real Time by Gang of Youth, do yourself a favor before the next episode drops. Make sure that you listen to it. Spoiler alert, I think it's a fantastic album. I mean, I own it on vinyl, so
Yeah, that's a good sign.
And this is me extending, like, I don't know, a olive branch to Matt for recommending Dark Matter by Pearl Jam, because, like, I feel like you really enjoy this next album.
Okay.
I mean, who knows? You could be like, Brian, what the hell?
We shall see.
So before we wrap up this episode here, do you have anything else to say about this album? Anything else before we kick it out?
Not really. I'm glad you appreciated it. I mean, I know it wasn't, your highest rated album ever, but I'm glad you at least gave it a solid, respectable score. And again, definitely not to the traditionalist country. One of these days we're going to have to do like a true, like, hardcore 90s country album by a 90s artist, like maybe a Garth Brooks album at some point.
Challenge accepted. All right, so listener, if you're listening to me talk on at this point, let's face it, you like what me and Matt do, and the best way that you can help support me and Matt at this point in our podcasting adventures is on that podcasting platform of choice. Make sure that you subscribe, follow, leave a positive rating if you're able to do that. Word of mouth is also a excellent way, because you can tell a friend. Sometimes we may not cover an album that you're familiar with. Sometimes we will. It all depends. But also, if you're listening to this on the YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below on how you felt about the review. If you're curious to see where we are at in the social medias, links are in the description down below. But for the last time in this review about car wheels on a gravel road, I am the one, the only, I don't know how I survived in this heat for this week, Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one, the only, the also hot as balls and not in the sexy way, Matthew James Durzik.
And, I mean, I know this review is over, but I just can't let it go.